بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا المرسلين محمد بن عبد الله عليه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, first of all, thanks for the Dr. Hani Mazidi and Mr. Muhammad Noor for their great efforts and for the organizing committee and the funding agencies and supporting bodies for this interesting conference. My talk is about the ability of intermittent fasting during Ramadan to impact and boost the body's immunity against infection. First of all, this is the disclaimer that on the behalf of myself and my co-authors, I declare that there is no actual or potential conflict of interest in relation to this presentation. As you know, we are now living under the new situation of COVID-19 outbreak. As a result of the devastating and the harsh complications and consequences of this outbreak, people start thinking about the dietary and lifestyle behaviors that may help in boosting the immunity and increasing the ability to resist and fight such kind of infection. And they start thinking about the dietary and lifestyle behaviors. And as you know, we are now just a few weeks away from the beginning of the month of Ramadan fasting, inshallah. So there is now a rising debate and question about the ability of fasting during Ramadan in improving, or there is a debate that is there any adverse effect of Ramadan fasting on the ability of our bodies to fight this kind of infection, and is it right that Ramadan fasting may help in increasing the severity of the outbreak and increasing the prevalence of the infection? This guides me to write an article and to collect and to review my research I have done with my colleagues and my team with regard to the Ramadan fasting. But I have to introduce to the importance of fasting and intermittent fasting by mentioning that fasting is now gaining a great interest with the scientific bodies. And as you can see, this is the Professor Yoshinori Osamu, who is the Nobel laureate in 2016 in the medicine branch. His Nobel actually was given for the fasting, actually, and its effect on longevity, specifically on the effect of fasting on autophagy, which is one of the most important mechanisms that the body utilizes to protect the body against the different cellular types of cellular damage, and helps to improve or increase the lifespan and improve the healthier life. So fasting is one of the mechanisms that trigger actually the autophagy and helps to improve the ability to fight the different problems that facing the body cells and systems. As a result of the increased and the accumulating research on intermittent fasting, this is a recent research published just a few months ago in the New England Journal of Medicine about the effects of intermittent fasting on health, aging, and disease. Before that, a few months before also, there was an interesting article on in the Science Journal titled by the Time to Fast. Many other high-impact, top prestigious journals started publishing about fasting and intermittent fasting and the health implications of intermittent fasting on different aspects of the human health. To go directly with our topic, human actually studies that we have done and other researchers have done on the effect of the fasting, and especially the intermittent fasting of Ramadan on the immunity. First, we are calling this type of fasting in Ramadan is intermittent because we are alternating between fasting and feasting within the 24 hours. We are fasting for 12 to 17 hours according to the seasonal season, solar season, and the geographical location. And this variation at the end is not complete fasting. It's not 24 hours. It's not complete like the other types of fasting. It is partial. It is intermittent fasting. So we have fasting and eating within the 24 hours. I will start with this kind of review. This is a kind of critical review about the effect of the nutrition and fasting mimicking diets and other different types of dietary alternations in the total caloric intake and the ability to prevent and treat the autoimmune diseases and the immunosenescence. Immunosenescence, from its name, the immune system becomes like in an aging stage, so it wouldn't be able to fight the infections and to work properly. The end, I will give you just only the yeah, the end results of the different studies I will review with you now. The end result is that the ability of fasting and different types of dietary restrictions to decrease the biological rate of aging and promote the anti-inflammatory mechanisms which contribute to reverse the variety of autoimmune diseases, in addition to improve the immune system and decrease the risk of immunosenescence. How? By killing the old and damaged cells and replacing the old and damaged cells with young functional cells. And this is very important finding to start with about how the fasting could help in improving the immune system. This is also another review article on the different aspects of the immunomediatory effects of Ramadan fasting on our health and disease. This interesting review article also ended with a very important finding that intermittent fasting during Ramadan helps to reduce the TNF alpha, interleukin 6, and interleukin 1 beta, which are called pro inflammatory cytokines that trigger the inflammation and increase the risk of infection and lowers the ability of the immune system to fight against the infections. This is our actually meta-analysis. We have done a systematic review and meta-analysis on the oxidative stress and the inflammatory markers that have been found to be involved in decreasing the efficacy of the immune system and increasing the risk of infection. It is well known that increasing the inflammation and oxidative stress will hinder the body systems unable to work properly and will lead to increased risk of chronic and acute diseases. So we reviewed the effect of Ramadan fasting on the pro-inflammatory cytokines and the oxidative stress in healthy people with focus on the TNF alpha and and interleukin 6, which are one of the most two important cytokines that are involved in increasing the inflammation and consequently affect the risk of infection. At the end, Ron, we reviewed about 500 studies. We put very strict inclusion and exclusion criteria, and we ended with the 12 studies. We analyzed all these 12 studies distributed over 8 countries from Iran, Turkey, Jordan, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Netherlands, and Denmark. And we found that at the end of Ramadan, there was a significant but small effect reduction in the interleukin 1 beta. There was a medium significant reduction in the interleukin 6. There was a small significant reduction in the TNF alpha and small significant reduction in the inflammatory marker that is called CRP or C-reactive protein, and a significant reduction in the malondialdehyde, which is an indicator for the oxidative stress. So these findings are important to show that in the Ramadan fasting has an ability actually to lower the risk of inflammatory markers, which have been known to increase the risk of infection and increase the or decrease the ability of the immune system to fight the infections. Another study we have done actually on also the Ramadan fasting in healthy subjects, about 60 healthy subjects, but we tested the effect of Ramadan fasting on specific genes. These genes are responsible for increasing the anti-inflammatory mechanisms and anti-oxidative stress mechanisms, which means the expression of these genes help to improve the ability of the bodies to fight the infections and improve the immune system at the end. So this is not direct, this is indirect effect. At the end, anything increasing the anti-inflammatory at the end will help in reducing the infection risk and increasing the ability of the immune system to fight these infections. So we found that there was significant high overexpression and increased expression for these three genes by about 90.5% for the TFAM, 54.1% increase in the SOD2 superoxide dismutase, and about 4 times increase in the expression of the NRF2, which is one of the major key genes that are responsible for the regulation of the anti-inflammatory mechanisms in our bodies. So this is very important to show how fasting increase the ability at the end of the body to improve the antioxidant mechanisms, and this expected to be reflected positively on the immune system. As we can see here, there's significant increase in the NRF2, TFAM, SOD2. There is a gene called SIRT1 and other one, SIRT3. SIRT3 was decreased, and this is good. This shows that Ramadan fasting is not associated with malnutrition and severe reduction in the calorie intake and in macro and micronutrient. And this is good for the body, that there is no any kind of deprivation and starvation from the nutrients. And this is another evidence that Ramadan fasting is a healthy fasting, is not associated with any kind of deprivation, severe deprivation in the intake of the nutrients, because we are eating at the night hours, so there is no any kind of starvation. So this gene was down regulated, which means there is no need for increasing the other mechanisms of energy production, because the body is getting sufficient amount of calorie. And another intermittent meta-analysis we have done also and published, alhamdulillah, in December of 2019, about the effect of the Ramadan fasting on the different components of the metabolic syndrome. What we are concerning here, and what's important for us, actually, once we revise these studies, 85 studies, including 4,326 subjects from 23 countries throughout the world. What's important for us, after analyzing all the collected references, about more than 2,000 references, we ended with the results. These are the summary of the table of the results. Ramadan fasting is associated with the reduction in the waist circumference, and this is very important. Our waist, the region in the abdomen, this surrounding this circular measurement of the abdomen, this is very important. This shows that the body is actually losing part of the internal stored fats, which is very important, and this is called the visceral fat, and partly the subcutaneous fat, because reduction in the waist circumference implies that there is a reduction in both subcutaneous and visceral fat inside the body. But this is important in reducing actually what is called the adipokines and the adipocytokines. This is another study we have conducted on the effect of Ramadan fasting on the visceral adiposity. As I mentioned, the waist circumference is reflecting the subcutaneous fat and the visceral fat, the fat inside our viscera, our internal body part. These fats are also decreased in Ramadan fasting because of the type of the pattern of fasting for 12 and 70 hours. Enforces the body to utilize the internal stores of energy from the fat to provide the energy, because there is no any kind of energy supply. So it's very important in reducing the adiposity and the associated what's called adipokines or cytokines that increase the inflammation. So decreasing this fat will lead to decrease in the inflammatory markers like interleukin 60 and alpha we have mentioned earlier. And increasing what's called the anti-inflammatory mechanisms like interleukin 10. And this is very important and confirms our discussion that Ramadan fasting could be mostly helpful in increasing the immunity. How? By decreasing the inflammatory markers and increasing the anti-inflammatory markers in our bodies. These are the MRI. We use the MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, to show how Ramadan fasting decreases the visceral adiposity, which reflected positively on the inflammatory systems, other systems. Yeah, sorry. Another study we have done also meta-analysis. We have just published in the last month, alhamdulillah, about the effect of Ramadan fasting on the body weight. And we found that there was a reduction in about 1 kilogram after revising 85 studies, including 4,176 subjects from the different continents. We analyzed more than about 2,300 studies, and we ended with 85 studies. We found there is a significant small to medium reduction in the body weight, and this is very important for our discussion with regard to immunity, because it's very well known and supported by a large body of evidence that obesity compromises the immunity. obesity compromises the immunity and hinders the immune system unable to fight the infections. And there is a very strong relationship between obesity, decreased immunity, and increased infection in our bodies. This is explained by the fact that obesity is associated with increased adipokines, the ones I have mentioned before. And these adipokines increase the risk of infection. At the same time, there is a decrease with obesity. Often there is increase in a hormone called leptin and decrease in a hormone called adiponectin. And I will show you how Ramadan fasting reverse these two hormones in a way that helps to fight the oxidative stress and inflammation, and at the end, expected to have a positive effect on the immune system. So, researchers believe that obesity has numerous synergistic interactions with viral infections. So, the more the obesity level, the more the viral infection because of the increased inflammatory adipokines that triggers the inflammation and decreases the efficacy of the immune system. This is our study now we have done on these two hormones, leptin and adiponectin, and how Ramadan fasting actually affects in a beneficial way these two hormones. We reviewed about 71 studies, including 3,234 subjects distributed over 21 countries. We found that Ramadan fasting is associated with slight but significant reduction in the leptin. Leptin, this is one of the hormones that is associated with obesity. This is decreased at the end of Ramadan. At the same time, uh, increased at the end of Ramadan, meaning that these two hormones that affects the weight regulation and body fatness and affects inflammatory mechanisms, they are changed in the favorable preferred way during Ramadan, which increases the belief that Ramadan fasting mostly has a positive effect against the infection. Another study about the body weight and body fatness and how Ramadan fasting reduces the body fatness in a significant way. As you can see here, the total trend of the body fatness is a reduction less than zero. So this is beneficial for our bodies. Here, this study we have also done on the effect of Ramadan fasting on sleep. I will not go with details because they are different aspects. I will not discuss it now. Right. Now we have to focus that oxidative stress and inflammation are associated with infection. It is also associated with other malfunctioning in our bodies, like what has been confirmed that oxidative stress, infection, and inflammation increase the male infertility. So any kind of treatment or interventions like fasting, like healthy diet that helps in lowering the oxidative stress and inflammation will help at the end to reduce the risk of infection. So these three components, inflammation, immunity, and oxidative stress, these are the three keywords for most of the chronic and acute diseases. So anything that reduces the inflammation, reduces the oxidative stress, will improve the immunity and help to fight the different diseases, whether infectious, acute, and chronic diseases. These results from our study, and I told you how in Ramadan fasting in our study decreased the pro-inflammatory cytokines interleukin 60 and alpha, and increased the anti-inflammatory cytokine interleukin 10. Also, the good thing about the IGF-1. The IGF-1 is one of the most important proteins in our bodies. This protein it works as inflammatory protein, and we have shown that Ramadan fasting has the ability to significantly decrease this kind of protein in our bodies. And this protein has been shown that in fasting, like Ramadan fasting, is able to decrease the IGF-1, which is very important in decreasing the risk of infection. So now I will start with the studies that have examined the effect of Ramadan fasting in the immune system, not just like the previous, like a kind of extrapolation and indirect relationship. But here I will review with you the studies that have been done on direct effect of the immune system, including one of this will be my study. I will show you. This is a study on the effect of Ramadan fasting on the what's called the innate immune system and the circulating immune complex. The major finding of that study, that Ramadan fasting has no any adverse effect on the neutrophils and other immune parameters in the fasting people. And also the innate immunity response for the intracellular infection factors like the gram-positive bacteria was not decreased, but was rather increased at the end of Ramadan fasting, meaning that in Ramadan fasting may help in increasing the immunity and the protection against the bacterial infection, not the viral like the COVID. This is for the bacterial infection, which is good still in our bodies. Other study, actually very well done study in top journal on the type of fasting that's called time restricted feeding. This is one of the kinds of fasting which is typically the same like Ramadan fasting. They found that with those healthy subjects who fasted for about 30 days, I think so, they found there was a kind of reduction in the inflammation and reduction in the natural killer cells, and that fasting also prevent and decrease the risk associated with aging diseases, and reduce what's called the immunosenescence في العربية الهرم المناعي. The immune system becomes aged and unable to fight the infections. Ramadan fasting found to be associated with decreased immunosenescence, which means it helps to trigger the immune system and improve its immunity against the infections. Another study on the circular immune complex during Ramadan also. The study revealed that Ramadan fasting does not have any adverse effect on the immune system for the healthy people. Can you imagine even the AIDS patients, those patients who have HIV, human immunodeficiency virus, and they have AIDS disease? This is a study on Muslim patients, AIDS Muslim patients who decided to fast during Ramadan. They found that Ramadan fasting did not show any adverse effect actually on the immunological parameters like elastic differentiation of the immune cells, CD4 cell counts, viral load, hematocrit levels. It was expected that Ramadan fasting will increase the viral load because they shift from 2 doses of the medication to 1 dose during Ramadan, because they have to take it at 1 dose at the night the day hours, and the day hours we are fasting, so they shift to 1 dose instead of 2 doses. Even so, there was no adverse effect on the immunological parameters. Also under the study, but this study tested the effect of Ramadan fasting model on the tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is still Ru'awi. The researchers, they took the blood of the subjects and they treated the subjects with the tuberculosis cells, and they found that Ramadan fasting reduce the chance of infection against this by this pathogen, and increase the body resistance by increasing the number of the macrophages. At the same time, they found fasting increase the secretion of the interferon gamma, which stimulate the immune mechanisms and resist against the bacterial infection and also the viral infection. Other study also, but this is on animal model, showed that these animals that were kept in fasting model, we call it fasting model. We remove the food and make the mice, the animals fasting like the Ramadan fasting. This is a mimicking model for the Ramadan fasting. The same model of intermittent fasting exposed the animals for this pattern of fasting. They found this model of intermittent fasting increased the efficacy of the immune system against the pathogenic microbes, the Salmonella typhimurium, that causes the famous typhoid fever. But a study also that resembles the Ramadan fasting, intermittent fasting, using a toxic substance called lipopolysaccharide. They found in those animals that were put on fasting model, they decrease the inflammation and the toxicity of this substance and improve the immune system against this toxic substance. Another study also in mice, but for the model of multiple sclerosis, which is an autoimmune disease, means that the body attacks itself. They found that Ramadan fasting has a positive effect on these autoimmune diseases. This is not like the other diseases. This is a special type of disease, autoimmune. At the end, this indicates that even those patients with autoimmune disease could be improved by Ramadan fasting. This is important study also how the interferon gamma, which I mentioned before, it triggers the antiviral infection mechanisms. They found in these animals that were kept in intermittent fasting protocol, they exhibited improve in the immune response in these experimental animals. How? By the increasing secretion of the interferon gamma and increase the body resistance to infection, especially in the hippocampus of the brain. And this means that fasting also protects the central nervous system and help to protect against Alzheimer, dementia, tremors, and other kind of neurodegenerative diseases. This study also, a typical study done by Egyptian Muslim researchers, they mimicked the Ramadan fasting by making the animals fasting for 30 days for 12 hours per day. This is a kind of mimicking, muhaka, mushabah, resembling for the pattern of Ramadan fasting. They found that the fasting improved immunity and metabolism and reduced the toxic effect of the oxidative stress we have mentioned before as triggering factor for infection on the animals that were subjected to fasting during Ramadan. Any comment? Hello? Continue. Okay. Other study also on animals on the intermittent fasting, also for the same model of Ramadan fasting on the animals. They found that in the Ramadan fasting model improve the immune indicators and enhance the flow of the neurotransmitters to the animals, which also increase the it protects the brain against the different neurodegenerative problems. So at the end, what are the dietary recommendations during Ramadan? We have to focus on two things, these. First, we analyzed the food intake during Ramadan. We found that our Ramadan fasting is associated with increased intake of total sugars, and this is not good for our immunity. It is well evidenced that increasing sugar intake, like in the Western diet, is something that compromises the immune system and increase the risk of infection, inflammation, autoimmune, auto-inflammatory, and allergic diseases. So the advice here that we have to give up from these high sugar foods, because high sugar will I don't say compromise, will adversely affect our immunity and increase the risk actually of infection during Ramadan. So the recommendation here is to increase the intake of fruits, vegetables from fruit salad, vegetable salads, increase the consumption of legumes, nuts, these healthy foods that have a blend of vitamins and minerals, especially zinc and selenium, that have been shown to increase the immunity against the viral infection. This study is very important study, 2020, for the COVID and coronavirus. They mentioned clearly that zinc and selenium, they have direct effect on the interferon response against the viral infection, especially for the influenza and coronavirus. So our advice here to increase and to make more attention toward the healthy diet, to avoid the high sugary diet, increase fruits, vegetables, especially legumes and nuts, increase the immunity of the body. So my conclusion here that in Ramadan fasting, we call it Ramadan diurnal intermittent fasting, may incur a small protection against inflammation, oxidative stress, and may help in boosting the immune system against the microbial infection, including the viral infection. I use the terms may because there is no direct study on Ramadan fasting and COVID. You know that this is the first season with COVID. So there is no any study, but this is a kind of extrapolation from the available literature that fasting may help in increasing the immunity against infection, including the viral infection. Till now, there is no research has been conducted on COVID-19. Thus, no definite conclusion could be drawn from the intermittent fasting and Ramadan intermittent fasting on this outbreak. The last thing before ending my talk is that we have to differentiate between fasting at the personal level and the social and spiritual activities like Salat al Jama'ah, like iftar together, gatherings. We have to be clear that gatherings, whether religious gatherings, social gatherings should be stopped. And because this is because the risk still is high, and there is high chance for the virus to recycle again and to reappear again. So it's we have to be clear that fasting as fasting for the personal level, it is good, beneficial, will help to improve our immunity. Then there is another comment that the droughtness and the dry mouth and the lack of saliva and mucus in the throat, this may increase actually the risk of infection. We have to be clear. So the solution is the social distancing, and avoiding the gatherings, because at the day hours while we are in dryness condition, this droughtness and dryness of the mouth may actually make a favorable environment for the viral infection. So we have to be careful that to avoid any contact, any gatherings with others during the day hours. And the night hours, we have to avoid the unhealthy, high fat, high sugar diet, increase the fruits, vegetables, and practicing fasting safely. And at the end, inshallah, Ramadan fasting, we believe, it will beneficially impact our body against this outbreak. وصدق الله العظيم وأن تصوموا خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. اللهم بلغنا رمضان وفرج عنا ما نحن فيه، وفرج عنا عن أمة الإسلام والجميع الإنسانية والبشرية ما هي فيه يا رب العالمين. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. And thank you for your kind listening.